It was supposed to be a simple thing. A quick meetup at the local bar, nothing serious. Clara had been talking about it for a few days, and she seemed excited, even though she didn't usually get too worked up over casual dates. Anna and I had joked about it, but we all knew Clara's cautious side. She liked to be careful, but she also enjoyed the thrill of meeting someone new. It was a typical Friday evening, and as she pulled on her jacket, Clara told us where she was going. I barely paid attention to the details, just nodded and murmured something in response. I was busy with my own evening plans, and besides, Clara always had a way of handling things. She never needed anyone to look out for her, or at least that's how it felt. I hadn't realized that something felt off until I got the text. I was in the middle of watching something on TV when my phone buzzed. Clara had sent a message, just a quick check-in. She said she was at the bar, waiting for the guy. A minute later, I got another text. This one felt a little more urgent. She was telling me the guy smelled bad and seemed off. Clara wasn't one to complain, and when she did, it usually meant something was wrong. I shot her a reply, trying to joke her out of it, but part of me felt uneasy too. It was strange, this sense that something wasn't right, even though I couldn't put my finger on it. By the time Anna and I were halfway through the movie, Clara texted again. The man had insisted on buying her a drink, and they were sitting at a table together. She didn't go into much detail, but I could hear her hesitation in the words. It wasn't just the smell of the man that had gotten to her. There was something else, something that made the air feel thick when I read her message. I felt that prickling sense of worry deep in my chest, like I had been tuned into something far off. Anna must have felt it too, because she immediately started asking if Clara wanted to leave, but I just shrugged it off. Clara always knew what she was doing, and I trusted her to handle whatever was happening. At least that's what I told myself. But things quickly took a turn when Clara sent me another message. She had asked the man a few questions, trying to make small talk to pass the time, and it just didn't sit right with her. Something about the whole conversation felt forced. She said he kept talking about things that didn't add up, details about himself that seemed a little too rehearsed. I tried to dismiss it, telling her that sometimes people were just awkward, that she shouldn't overthink it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was in some kind of danger. I know now that those warning signs were there, but back then, I didn't fully understand what they meant. Then, Clara dropped a bombshell. She told me that the man had been texting her the whole time, asking her to wait. His messages were weirdly insistent, and she said she felt like he wasn't really her date at all. In fact, she wondered if this man, this strange, older guy, had somehow tricked her. I couldn't even believe it. My mind raced, trying to piece everything together. Clara, who was always so sharp and alert, had been fooled, and now she was sitting there, probably wishing she had never gone to that bar in the first place. A few minutes later, I got a final text from Clara. She was leaving, she said, but something in her words made me feel sick. She was nervous, but she didn't want to alarm anyone. I could almost picture her standing up to leave, trying to act casual. I was about to text her back when I heard a noise from the window. Anna had gotten up to check something, and I followed her gaze out toward the street. That's when I saw it. A car slowly driving past, its headlights casting an eerie glow on the pavement. I didn't need to say a word. Anna and I just looked at each other, both of us understanding exactly what had just happened. The man had been following her home. By the time Clara pulled into the driveway, I could already feel the tension building in my chest. It wasn't just the fact that she was home safe. Something about the way she had left the bar, that strange sense of urgency in her voice, kept gnawing at me. I barely heard her footsteps as she walked in through the door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't as calm as she seemed. Clara told Anna and me that she'd seen the same car again, following her a few blocks down the road. She didn't want to admit it, but the panic in her voice was hard to ignore. She was trying to stay composed, acting as though it was just some coincidence. But I could see the fear in her eyes. The man hadn't just been at the bar. He had followed her from the moment she left, like he had known exactly when and where she would go. There was no denying it now. She was being stalked. I sat there, listening to her tell us what had happened, trying to absorb it all. But the more I heard, the more I realized that Clara wasn't the same. The confident older sister I knew was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. She was rattled, no longer sure of what to believe. And it made my skin crawl to think that someone had been watching her, following her movements as if she were some kind of prey. Then, just as I was about to suggest she call the police, Clara received a message. It wasn't from the man at the bar, but it was close enough. His texts were becoming more frequent, more pointed. The kind of messages that made my stomach twist in knots. He knew she was home. He knew where she lived. And he wasn't going to stop. "I'll see you soon," one of the messages read. It sent a chill up my spine. No one should ever feel like they were being watched in their own home, but that was exactly what was happening to Clara. We all tried to reassure her, but the house felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were closing in. Anna moved to the window, her face pale, scanning the street. The streetlights outside cast strange shadows on the pavement, and it felt like we were all waiting for something to happen. Clara's phone buzzed again. The man's words were getting darker, more sinister, as if he were savoring the terror he was causing. It was clear now. He wasn't just some lonely guy on a date gone wrong. He had been playing a game all along. It wasn't until the sound of something scraping at the window that I realized just how close the danger was. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it came again, harder this time. A loud thud that echoed through the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal against glass. I froze. Anna's eyes widened in terror. We both stood there, unsure of what to do. Clara had already grabbed the phone, dialing our parents before I could even think to react. I heard the sound of footsteps racing outside. My father, I knew, had heard the commotion and was rushing to the window to see what was happening. The cold terror that had taken root in my stomach only grew stronger as I realized the full scale of the situation. The man was here. He had found her, and he was trying to get inside. The window rattled again, louder this time, and the scraping sound of metal against the frame was unmistakable. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I glanced at Anna. Her face was pale, her lips barely moving as she tried to call out to Clara. But nothing came out. She was just as frozen as I was. Every instinct told me to run, to hide, to get away from that window, but my feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. All I could do was wait for Clara's next move. Clara was the first to act. She grabbed her phone and dialed our parents without a second thought. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to stay focused enough to give our father the details. As she spoke, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps from outside the window. Someone was trying to force the lock open. The noise was a constant, unnerving scrape of metal against glass, as if the man was trying to wedge something into the window frame. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the full horror of the situation. The man wasn't just watching us from a distance. He was trying to break in. Anna backed away from the window, her eyes wide with panic. I could hear her mumbling something to herself, something I couldn't quite make out. She turned to me, trying to keep her voice steady, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "We have to lock the door," she whispered urgently. but we both knew it was too late. The danger was already here, and locking the door wouldn't stop it. It wouldn't stop him. I stood there, frozen, just staring at the window as the sound of the man's struggle grew louder. Clara was still on the phone with our father, but her voice was trembling now, barely audible. I could hear him shouting from outside, trying to get the man to stop, but the intruder didn't listen. It was as if he were determined to get inside no matter what. I could barely keep my composure, and I don't think Clara or Anna were doing much better. Then, through the curtain, I saw the figure. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark silhouette against the light of the street lamp. But as he got closer, I saw his face, twisted in anger or frustration. He was so close that I could almost touch him. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I wanted to scream, to shout at Clara to do something, but it felt like my body had locked up. It was the worst kind of helplessness, the kind that left you feeling like a spectator in your own life. The man's hand reached up to grab the window, and that's when I finally heard my father's voice, loud, urgent, and unmistakable. He was outside now, confronting the man directly. The man didn't seem to hesitate. He shoved the window hard, trying to push his way in, but just as quickly I heard the screech of tires on the pavement. The man had turned and bolted, jumping into his car and speeding away. I couldn't believe it was over. Just like that, the terror stopped, leaving us standing in stunned silence. My father rushed back into the house, his face grim. He barely spoke as he checked on us, making sure we were all okay. It was clear, though, that none of us were okay. Not really. There was no relief in his eyes, no sign that everything was fine now that the man was gone. He was still out there, and we knew it. We could hear the sirens as they wailed in the distance, but I knew in my gut that we would never see this man caught. The fear we felt that night wasn't going to just go away. It had marked us all, and nothing would ever be the same. The house felt different after that night. Even though the intruder was gone, the space we had always known as safe now seemed alien. Every creak in the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the trees outside made me jump. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, even in the comfort of our home. It was hard to shake the feeling that the man, whoever he was, had left something behind, something that couldn't be erased with time. I knew Clara felt the same way. The look in her eyes whenever she glanced out the window told me everything. She didn't feel safe here anymore. Clara hadn't been the same since. The confident sister who used to laugh off anything that came her way had become a shadow of herself. She barely spoke unless she had to, and when she did, there was a coldness in her voice that wasn't there before. It was like the terror of that night had stolen part of her. I wanted to comfort her, to make things right, but the truth was, I didn't know how. We had all been affected, each of us in our own way, but Clara had taken the brunt of it. She was the one the man had stalked, the one who had nearly been dragged into something far worse. The police came the next day, taking our statements and scouring the house for evidence, but it was clear from the start that they didn't have much to go on. The man's car had vanished into the night, and his phone number was untraceable. They told us they'd keep an eye out, but deep down, I knew they wouldn't be able to find him. It was like he had disappeared into thin air. There were no witnesses at the bar, no one who could remember anything about him, and his number was fake. The police couldn't even confirm the man's identity. It was as though he had been a ghost, a shadow that had briefly touched our lives before fading away. For a while, I thought about what it would have been like if we had just stayed at the bar a little longer, or if Clara had left when she first felt uncomfortable. I thought about what might have happened if the man had gotten inside. It was a horrible thought, but one I couldn't shake. We had been so close to something worse. But then, when I looked at my family, at Clara, at Anna, at our parents, I realized something else. We were stronger because of it. The bond we shared, the way we pulled together when the threat came knocking, made me believe that we would be okay. But the uncertainty still lingered. The man might have been gone, but his shadow hung over us, and I didn't know if we'd ever truly feel safe again. Despite the investigation stalling, the house was quieter after the police left. It felt like the calm after a storm that you know is only temporary. We didn't talk about it much after that night, but I could see the fear in Clara's eyes when she looked outside, when she walked past the windows. It was like she was waiting for him to come back, like she knew that somehow, even without evidence, he was still out there. That was the hardest part, knowing that we had no answers, no closure. We were left with nothing but a lingering fear and the uncomfortable truth that our home had been violated in ways we couldn't undo. Clara never spoke about it again. She moved on as best as she could, but I could see it in her every day. The way she hesitated when someone knocked at the door, the way she checked her phone too many times to count. Anna and I stayed close, watching over Clara when she didn't know. But no matter how much we tried to protect her, the truth was that we couldn't undo what had happened. The man had taken more than just her peace of mind. He had taken a part of all of us, and I wasn't sure we would ever get it back,